Welcome to All Things Financial with Jack Driscoll. Each week, Jack takes on all things you thought were hard to understand about your finances and makes it fun, easy, but most of all interesting. From insurance to the best way to save your money and squeeze the most out of the dollars you put aside for your rainy day. And now, you have a friend in the money business. Here's your host, Jack Driscoll.
Welcome back again, everyone, to another edition of All Things Financial. What I've been covering over the last couple weeks and over the next week or so is college financial planning, I guess I would call it. The impact college expenses, planning for college, how to finance college, whether we're borrowing for college, and whether we're repaying loans for the rest of ours and our children's lives has become a major issue in financial planning and even spills over into retirement planning. So we see a lot of parents and even grandparents who have taken opportunities, maybe loans, maybe have finances out of their own retirement assets, crimping or crippling the parents' finances to help fund college education, or sometimes help the students who can't get a job after they're out of college or can't repay the loans because the job might not pay adequate enough income. While the loan repayment now is triggered, the students don't have enough money in their budget to actually be able to repay the high student loan repayments. And the parents and grandparents are pulling money sometimes out because they want to help out of their own retirement assets. So it's a big problem. It's always been a problem. It's now grown beyond a big problem. In some cases, it's a catastrophic problem. There are some people who are unable to repay their loans. They're in forbearance, other issues that come up. It's detrimental to your credit rating. It's just not what we planned when we thought about and dreamed about college and succeeding and graduating and getting out and hopefully having the promise of better and higher paying jobs and things like that. And sometimes it didn't work out because of the lack of financial planning in advance. And I did a calculation on this, and I have resources here, and I'll share them all with you as we go through them. I did educate back in probably the 80s. I went into the schools and did classes. I was actually a guest instructor, I guess, for a couple hours just to help students understand financial planning, saving, debt, how does the stock market work, how do we grow money, how to become wealthy if you want through different means. And back in the 80s, I was in high school. Usually some of the teachers, they'd call me in. And I offer that even today. Anyone who wants someone to come into the classroom and give anything like that, or even parents' meetings, I'm happy to do that on almost any topic that deals with financial planning. But one of the illustrations I gave them back then, now remember, this is the 80s. So anyone who listened to me back in the 80s would have been high school students. So some of this information I provided them applies to college, and I'm going to show you why in a minute. My lesson back then, I was trying to instruct them, hey, listen, kids, when you graduate from high school or you go to college, number one, you're going to get hit with a ton of credit card applications. Now, you don't even have a job, but because you're in college, these credit card companies buy lists, and they immediately want to put you into debt. Well, you know, when you come out from under their parents' wings for freedom for the first time, but you're not paying any of the bills, that's a pretty good time. So you look at this and you say, okay, I'm out of the house, you're in college, the parents are footing all the bills, they're paying for all your food, they're paying for everything, and here come credit card applications where you can go out and buy stereos or iPhones or whatever you want, jewelry or clothes, and not have to pay for it until what? Later. It's so enticing, most kids do it. So there's our first problem. And I taught in the schools, please don't live on credit. So what I did was I used as an example, when you get out of school, high school or college, the first things you're going to do are probably rent an apartment and buy a car, either buy or lease a car. So my illustration back then dealt with, here's what happens if you save up for, back then it was stereos and boom boxes. Now, of course, it's iPhones and tablets, things like that. So I would say instead of buying those things on credit with instant gratification, take 6 months or 8 months, save up the money for it, and not pay all those loan interest costs and get yourself into debt. Well, these credit cards are the first sign of danger. If you cannot resist the credit cards, you probably will never be able to control your financial future for all of your life. So there are different personality sets. Some people need instant gratification and will bite on those credit card applications. And that's the majority of you that I'm speaking to. And the minority of you will say, no, I'm not going to extend out if I can't afford it. My parents taught me properly. You don't buy things until you can afford them. If you see something you want, start saving up for it. When you have the money saved, then you can go out and buy it. And they're the ones that can become wealthy. No matter what their pay, no matter what their income, they can become wealthy because they will typically apply the proper financial habits of setting aside money and not spending everything of what they make. So I did this calculation with a car in mind, and I redid it this morning before the show with college in mind. And it's the same concept, and here it is. I looked at the average costs of college, and we'll go through that right after this. But the average costs of college depend on many things. So I just plugged in a 4-year projected expense of $60,000, maybe $12,000 a year, something like that, maybe $15,000 a year. So I just rounded it off, and I said, okay, $15,000 a year with everything, including books and food and housing and all that, not just tuition. And I figured, okay, if a parent has to fund $60,000 or a student has to take out loans for $60,000 or whatever, I looked at, what if we pre-planned and we said, instead of paying a loan back over 15 years after the expense is incurred, in other words, we go to student loans or credit cards or whatever loan source. Some parents are taking home equity loans out of their home to repay for college. I don't care how it's done. If it's a loan, I'm figuring 15 years, 5% interest, just to use a round number, of payback. And I'm saying and that's what most people are doing, by the way. It's either student loans or home equity loans if they don't have the money set aside. Some are pulling from investment accounts that might be earning 5%. So they're pulling from their retirement investment accounts, pulling out the money for college and depleting a portion of the investment accounts, which still costs 5% or whatever it would have been earning. So here's the example. I looked at $60,000 to borrow $60,000 by the time the child graduates, because no loan repayments are sometimes due through the years of college. Other times they are. It depends on the type of loan. Some loan repayments are deferred. So you're borrowing year 1, year 2, no payments are due. Year 3, no payments are due. Year 4, still no payments are many times due until the student gets a job, becomes employed, and then that triggers the repayment. So let's say we have $60,000 balance on this loan, 15 years to repay it at 5%. The payment on that would roughly average, I've calculated, $474.48 a month. So in doing this calculation over 15 years, I wondered, it was $60,000. How much is this totaled up that we're repaying? And I came to, it's a total number of payments totaling $85,406. So when you take a $60,000 expense and you finance it over 15 years at 5% interest, repayments, you're in essence paying $85,000 for a $60,000 whatever, whether it's a car, whether it's a house, whether it's college. So when we look at this college financing, you spent and needed $60,000, but you paid $85,000 for it. You've paid almost 1.5 times whatever the expense was because you did it before you could afford it, or you didn't save up for it in advance. So then I looked at, okay, if you're repaying this anyway, if you know you're going to do it, and you're paying for it over 15 years, and this is what I figured out back in the 80s, don't you have the opportunity to plan which 15 years? And by that I mean the date of college, 15 years after, or how about choose the 15 years before? So over either 15-year period, you're going to pay for this $60,000 expense. So that's either a save up for it early or pay for it after the event. So then I did calculation on, well, what if they paid for this $60,000 college projected education for all along the 15 years up until they get to college, to have the $60,000 available at the time of need? Wouldn't that still be the same number, $474 a month over 15 years, et cetera? So I went back to check and see. And I did this calculation, and here it turns out, on this hypothetical example, if this person is able to save, where they're borrowing and repaying at 5%, if they're able to save and that savings earns approximately the same 5%, I did that to keep everything equal, that person that begins saving in advance, beginning 15 years in advance of the expense, has to put aside only $224.48 a month. Now, folks, that's huge. They've cut the amount in half by choosing which 15 years to do this in. The 15 years prior to the expense or the 15 years after. So here's how it worked. $224.48, they start 15 years, these parents start 15 years prior to the projected date of the expense, and they save it for 15 years. Then I added up that payment. How much is this $60,000 college expense costing this parent? And when you add that up, $224 a month times 12 months every year and then times 15 years, the total amount out of pocket at those 15 years is not $85,000. It's not even $60,000. You say, how can it not be $60,000? They needed $60,000 at that time. You know what it is? It totals to only $40,406. So where does the rest come from? If the parents set aside in advance for 15 years, prudent financial planning, saving for future needs in advance of those future needs, not waiting until it's too late, that person is benefiting by discounted dollars. The interest earned on the accounts is paying the rest of the expense for them. Now, here's what's interesting to look at. You save up over the 15 years prior to the expense $40,000 toward the $60,000 expense. It doesn't only save you the $20,000 difference. It saves you the $45,000 difference. Had you not done that, you would have repaid $85,000. Here you only spent $40,000, and it's the same 15 years, same amount of time, just a different time period, either before the event, having interest work for you, or after the event, having interest work against you. After the event means interest is working for the banks or whoever it was. That's a huge lesson in financial planning. You can get 2 kids into college for the same expense it will cost you for 1 kid into college by not doing it properly, by not planning in advance, waiting until the event and then borrowing the money and repaying it over 15 years doubles the cost. So I wanted to share that with you. I just worked that up this morning. I reworked that from back of one of my 80s examples that I taught in the schools. Now my problem there was I was teaching the kids how to manage their financial affairs once they graduated high school or college. Where do the kids get this education today? Same place they got it back then, nowhere. So everyone listening on the radio and everyone watching, you may want to get some financial advisors. You can call me. I'll go into groups. I'll go into Rotary groups. I'll go into schools. I'll talk about any topic of financial planning that I think can benefit most of you who will never get these lessons, ever, for all of your life. But I study this all the time. I do this every day, all day. This is all I do. All the areas of financial planning that people and business owners have to deal with and don't have anywhere else to turn. That's what I do. Now, what I also looked at, and we touched on this last week, was, it gets complicated. We get into this FAFSA and CSS profile and financial aid applications in college. There's a lot to this. I've said, I can't tell you in how many shows, don't try to do this on your own. It's like fixing your car. I mean, we could do it. It'd probably run for a while. But there's no way that after what I've gone through that I think anybody else can do it. Yes. Is it worth all the effort and studying and education to learn it only once? Where for me it's worth it because I use it over and over and over again on multiple families. You'd be studying all of this effort just once to try to get it right and then maybe make a mistake. I don't think it's worth it, but maybe you do. So here's what I did. I went this morning again. I went on FAFSA.gov. I remember I talked to you about that last week. And I said, I know you on the radio can't see this, but you on the TV somewhat can. All I did here was I went to FAFSA.gov, FAFSA.gov. It is required to fill out a FAFSA application or you're not able to get any aid at all. So FAFSA is number one. You go on to FAFSA.gov and print out this worksheet I'm holding up. And this worksheet, it's kind of complicated. So then I'm going to caution you. My next caution for the day is, okay, where do we go for help? Well, some places say they will specialize in college financial aid applications. There are scams. There are scams. I'm not saying they are scams. There are scams that have come out with college planning, college financial aid. We'll help you do this. Some will charge a fee for $495 or $800 or whatever will help you get through the whole process. That may be okay. And sometimes it may not be okay. So I have articles here that I've printed out of the newspapers and pulled off the web. I mean, I have them here today. And you'll see here student aid scams. I mean, they're just student aid scams. And some of the scams are, here we'll help you through this financial aid process that you could have done for free maybe, that you could have done almost just as easily. And I do offer some assistance for some of you where if you want to call my office and get some resources and you want to do it yourself, call me. Call the office. I'll share with you some resources and at least help guide you if I can if you want to do it on your own, but get some initial guidance and steps on this. Secondly, when you get to some of these places that charge, some might be legitimate, some might not be. So the hard part is it worth, number one question, is it worth paying someone to help guide you through this process if they're legitimately going to guide you through this process with no ulterior motive other than to get paid a fee to do so? Absolutely yes. Absolutely yes, it would be. But many times you'll find, wait a minute, what's their ulterior motive? Are they having another motive in mind where they want to capture all of your assets, or they want to get you into specific types of loans? And some of the scams to watch out for are dangerous. So, or they may want to move your assets around, so the real intent and purpose might not be to help guide you through the college planning process, but might be to get control of your assets or have better, and you need to stay away from all of that. All of that. The other thing is these college aid and financial aid scams had come out, some of you are probably familiar with it, that they would telemarket. They would telemarket you parents or the kids and say, you can qualify for college. And the response on the phone is, no, we can't. We don't have any money. Our grades aren't high enough. We guarantee you, they would say, we can get you into college. You won't have to pay this and that and the other. You won't have to repay until you're out of school. And by then you'll have a great job and you'll be able to afford to repay. You'll be a doctor or a financial wizard or whatever. And folks, it just sounds too good to be true. And while it's not that easy. So sometimes you'll see a college financial aid company that specializes and gets commissions or fees for every financial aid applicant they place. So they're getting people sometimes qualified to go to school, and it's legitimately going to school, who they know will never be able to satisfy the curriculum. They can't pass the courses. And they know they're going to bomb out or fail out. But they got paid. The problem is the student is now saddled with that debt. So we have to be really, really ethical here and think and use your common sense and deal with only sources that are trustworthy, because those scams are real. I'm not making that up. They're real scams. People have real loan repayments from student debt they've never graduated. So part of the process, this process of financial planning for college, I think includes, are you a reasonable candidate for college? Are you going to be serious about this? Do you know what you want in your future? Or is this just like, I don't know, I'll just go in, I'll pick this major for now, I'll change majors. So parents and students alike, one of my cautions is life planning before financial planning to help accomplish your life planning is my lesson for the day. All right, folks, I appreciate your tuning in. We'll be back again next week with another edition of All Things Financial.
Securities and investment advisory services offered through SagePoint Financial Inc., member FINRA SIPC, and registered investment advisor. Insurance services offered through Driscoll Insurance and Financial Services Inc., which is not affiliated with SagePoint Financial Inc.